Hello and welcome to another wonderful episode of Anime Explained. I am Shergog, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look into the question of how Platinum Dragonlord has managed to at least partially control Zashi Zetsumai and exert a certain amount of influence over Slaine. But before we dive deep into the topic, I want to take a moment to thank all of my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as to say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function who made one-time donations. And now with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. Zashi Zetsumai was essentially the secret weapon of the Slaine Theocracy, a formidable power with a level of 88. She could utilize even skills from the deceased death god Surshana to unleash attacks like the goal of all life is death, killing opponents, even those normally completely immune to death magic, like the undead or a golem, in less than a minute. Additionally, thanks to her elven blood, she was blessed with an extraordinarily long life. And despite her appearance as a teenager, she has likely over a century of experience under her belt. And she would likely have many more centuries ahead before her age renders her combat ineffective. But despite her immense power, Zashi wasn't frequently used in combat. During the turbulent last years of the Theocracy, her primary role was instead to stand guard, ensuring that the equipment of the 6 players that founded Slaine didn't fall into the wrong hands. And while this duty was quite vital, the Theocracy had managed to safeguard the players' items for centuries before, without any significant issue. If items had gone missing from the treasury chamber, Slaine would have simply needed to send some of Zashi's ancestors to retrieve them, or perhaps the Black Scripture. And as seen in other instances, even Clementine, who had stolen just a crown from a single Miku priestesses, was relentlessly pursued by a scripture. If the Black Scripture hadn't been occupied, she might have already been found before she could have linked up with Khajiit. Even if it is required for a godkin to remain connected to the ancestors' items at all times and stand guard, they could potentially entrust the task to the leader of the Black Scripture for a few days or so. However, while Slaine had no issue sending the Black Scripture led by a godkin and equipped with a world-class item to prevent the rebirth of another Dragonlord, they seemingly couldn't deploy Zashi as they wished. Because Platinum Dragonlord had apparently made it clear to them that he would most likely personally intervene in any war Zashi Zetsumai is deployed in, meaning that if Slaine would use Zashi Zetsumai openly against the Elf Kingdom, then they would be punished, and so severely that it could quite literally spell the end for the state of the 6 great gods. This raises the question of why Platinum even knew about Zashi's existence, and why he insisted that Slaine refrained from using her strongest weapon, while seemingly having no issue with the other godkins. Now, Platinum might simply not know much about the other godkin. While the leader of the Black Scripture might be stronger than Solution Epsilon, he is still quite young, probably about 19 or 20 years old, making him better suited for such risky missions. Additionally, Platinum seems to have the ability of tracking, for example, Sheltier Bloodfallen Down, who had fought against the Black Scripture. And therefore Platinum was also able to initiate a surprise attack on the Valkyrie. And Platinum had also initiated a far less surprising attack on Ainsulgon's tent, together with Azud Aindra, although only after the latter had lured Albedo away. This suggests that Platinum has a way to gather important information, possibly possessing a mirror similar to that of Ainz. However, since Platinum also knows about the existence of Rufus, there might have been contact between the two. Platinum likely told Slaine that deploying Zashi would be the equivalent to a nuclear first strike, triggering a reaction that would lead to Slaine's destruction. namely his intervention in the war. He also probably outlined Slane's boundaries and emphasized that he would not tolerate the daughter of two godkins, Zeshi's mother being the former strongest godkin of the theocracy and her father being the Elf King, the direct offspring of one of the 8 Greed Kings. Because Zeshi is therefore basically the same on a genetic level as a fully fledged player. Alternatively, he might have conveyed this message centuries ago, perhaps shortly after the death of the 8 Greed Kings. He could have expressed that he wouldn't simply stand idly by, while even normal godkins were used to annihilate entire nations. This might have been in response to the 8 Greed Kings conquering a continent, pushing the Dragon Lords to the brink of extinction, and annihilated countless other nations and species in the process. He would have discussed all of this with Rufus, the first servant of Soshana back then, which would also explain how he knew Rufus's name and his undead nature. This would mean that the actions of the godkins would then have been limited to covert operations and to simply securing and guarding Slane's very own territory. And the reason why the theocracy only talked about Zeshi is probably that the Elf King had once overcome and defeated the strongest godkin, and Zeshi is likely the only one capable of even defeating the Elf King. In other words, while devastating wars are a natural part of the New World, Platinum, who has witnessed the war against the 8 Greed Kings, probably wouldn't simply accept that the descendants of players destroy entire countries again. This would also explain why Platinum attacked Ainsul Gone only after he had destroyed the Kingdom of Riestais, rather than during the Cuts Plain battle, where he achieved a military victory and caused the death of almost 200,000 men. But then he did so as an ally of the Baharut Empire, and Ainz then came to rule his kingdom peacefully. And finally, with all of that said, it is also unclear whether or not Platinum even knew who the Elf King was, because if Platinum can keep Zeshi in check, he is likely stronger than the Elf King, by quite a lot. And given that the Elf King is a direct descendant of one of the 8 Greed Kings, who fought this very apocalyptic war against the Dragon Lords, Platinum probably holds little affection for him. And since even the Elf King considered himself the strongest, despite all evidence, and belittled the dragons as relatively crude creatures, with only physical strength and a lot of HP to offer, the two likely never met, and Platinum might just simply think that the Elf Kingdom is just another completely normal nation, and not one controlled by the offspring of a player. Thus, Platinum probably didn't realize that Zeshi was doing him a favor. She would have defeated a descendant of the 8 players, and in fact she has done so, but considering other events, likely demanded Platinum's attention, like again Ainz destroying Riestais for good, he probably wouldn't even have learned that Zeshi was deployed very briefly in this war, and only against the Elf King. After all, Slane had sent an entire army to the Evasha forest, so having Zeshi on site for half a day probably wouldn't have caused much disturbance. And with that said, I say thank you very much for watching. Please feel free to share your own opinions about this video and how Platinum had made it clear where the limits of the Godkin deployment are to Slane. And while you do so, I say my special thanks to Ada Daddy Ada, Bad Guy Yi, Bad Burrito 316, Bezer, Ben C, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Dragonlord Placidu Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Thiralchivan, Guy with That Hat, Hector Marino, Hoss, Haster, Jacob G, Jonna B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Lelouch Britannia Viffy Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Loverazor, Merovec, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, O'Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pantom, Personage, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Q&A Caracos P, Shergox is Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rocket Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Xenukai, and Zonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.